Here we go.
What you like to do?
Oh, I don't know. Play chess. Screw.
Well, let's play chess.
Richardson gonna take off and run. He's in there! Touchdown! I-N-D-Y! Outside give to Taylor. Stretching it out. He's at the 5, and he walks in untouched. Jonathan Taylor. Turner wants to do more damage, and he does.
Here's Halliburton into the front court. Mishandled it, but gets a shot. Hits it! Hits it!
John, I have never been better to be on the air with you here in Indianapolis, a place where so many of my dreams have come true.
The Ride with JMV on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Well, I think when you look at it, we felt good about the room. We did. We got young guys, right, obviously, and we have full faith and confidence in those guys, and they got to go play. You know what I mean? Those young guys got to go play in this league, and that's how you develop as a player. So that's where we're at with it.
Was there concern over JuJu's injury history?
No, I mean, shoot, he came back from it, and unfortunately, he got hurt again. So that was just a tough break. You know, you can't predict injuries, and just part of football.
That's Shane Steichen right there a little bit earlier today. Thank you for joining us on the show. A little bit of a frog going on here. I'm going to have to do my Lou Brown impression from Major League a little bit later on. My apologies. I'm assuming it's kind of the dry, right? If you're doing some yard work, as I did last night, maybe a little bit dry. But hopefully we can put up with it. And if you're extra cool to me this afternoon, I'll break out because I'm sure at the end the late, great Lou Brown can make an appearance here from Major League, the manager on the show. But I want to get back to what Shane Steichen had to say a little bit earlier today. He's not wrong about anything, about how at all he laid it out. However, I think you, just like us, we that cover it, we that talk about it, if you write about it, James Boyd, bottom of the hour, I'm sure will bring it up as well. You can always be better prepared. And these guys preach preparedness around every corner, every moment. And to me, I think that's all anybody was asking. Sure, develop young players you believe in. Sure, injuries, you can't predict them. They just happen. However, I would also argue that, unfortunately, with JuJu Brents, what's the first thing you think about? And this is unfortunate. Great dude, local guy, Warren Central. But what is now the first thing that you think about? And really, it was prior to even at this moment. What's the first thing that you think about? And that is being injured, not participating, missing time, not being active because of that. So my thought would be, in the entirety of this, you can always be better prepared. Now, still, me sitting here on Wednesday and talking about it, we have no idea what's going to go down coming up on Sunday. Maybe it's drastically different. Maybe what they're talking about right now and having full confidence in their guys, maybe that works out. But we have been down this path before. I think that's one of the reasons why most of you out there thought, all right, secondary-wise, you need more depth, whether it's safety or corner. And I know at the corner position, Rick Venturi came on here a number of times. The time going back to June, he was live with us when we were up at Morse Reservoir for one of our back deck stops with Heaven Hill Distillery. Had mentioned that then. You just always need to be as prepared. And again, maybe my lack or your lack of preparedness is them just viewing the entire situation differently. But I will also caution, and this is something I talk about regarding the Colts all the time, the fans have to stop being right. I mean, the fans are all over this. We talked about this yesterday as well. The fans were all over, just kind of waiting for it. Now, again, part of that is the doom and gloom, the whole schleprock attitude that a lot of people around here have because of the way things have gone down in the past handful of years. Yeah, that part I understand. But we have seen the fans, we have seen the media be accurate on things to where you would much rather the team be accurate about it. The team show those results. The team show you that they are indeed ahead of it. Every time you go through a draft, what is one of the first things, buzz term-wise, you hear after the draft is, well, it went the way, I think every single team ends up saying it. It went the way we thought. The board went the way we thought. These guys supposedly know absolutely everything. So we'll hold them to that. I know you can't predict injuries, but with an injury-prone individual, it is up to you to be prepared with what is going to be the likely outcome. I think that's all that anybody has asked. Now, again, if, guys in the secondary from the practice squad or Womack that you picked up on waivers 3 weeks ago, Lamons, who you added to the active roster yesterday when you put JuJu Brents on the IR, if these guys, in your belief, is the answer, and they turn out to be the answer, okay. The thing that you can't have is, once again, those that cover the team and the fan base being right about this, because this is all too familiar territory, and normally it doesn't work out that way. Fans and media can't be different. You're always going to look for just the smallest piece of thing that you're accurate about, that you're right about. But it just seems like here, again, in the last handful of years, that we and you have been right about a lot of things that, honestly, you would want the Colts to be right about, and things the Colts are supposed to be right about, things that they're supposed to see because of their vast experience. So I get why the question is asked. I get why we talked about it leading up. And I also get your universal skepticism about where this thing is going to go. Now, if there was a game in which you thought, all right, secondary-wise, if you're going to be down a guy and you're trying to work some new guys in and get these new guys experience, I think matching up against Malik Willis would be a nice fallback to get acclimated. However, we do know this. Rarely here in recent memory have things gone the way we think regarding the Colts. So that is also a problematic thought. They have a lot of things that they have to prove coming up on Sunday, don't they? Where do we start? Make a list of things that this team has to prove to you, and rightly so. And on that list, it's going to start with the defense. It's going to start with what they're doing against the rush. Because if you remember yesterday, we went over what Gus Bradley had to say in their preparedness for C.J. Stroud to, quote, rattle the quarterback. When they got at him, they did move him around, and they actually sacked him. But I don't think anybody that watched that game universally, again, felt that he was rattled by any stretch of the imagination. And at the same time, if your major focus was on rattling the quarterback and you missed on that, as the completion percentage would show you with C.J. Stroud, on the other hand, giving up what you gave up on the ground, that's the reason why you lost the game. In a close game at home. A very winnable game at home. That seems like that is a term that we end up talking about all the time. A very winnable game that you have at home and you don't. This weekend, that defense against the run, against Josh Jacobs, cannot look like that. It can't. Because then we're going to start asking questions. Then we're going to think, all right, and again, I know DeForest Buckner didn't practice today. Hopefully he's able to give it a go. But we're going to start asking questions. And while everybody is going to mull around the defensive coordinator, and again, that's always going to be that first domino, you would guess, because he, and again, rightly so, he has been at the top of the list of criticism for that group for a couple of years now. While everybody else is going to be mulling over the defensive coordinator's credentials and why they don't jettison him in September, I will also point the finger, as I did after week number 1, at the individuals on that defense. The guys that are out there, the guys individually that create a unit that absolutely have to be better, regardless of where your focus in game planning might be. Let's face it, those guys have to feel the same way as you do. That was a bunch of bullcrap. For that group, for that defense, and you do it once, and the defensive coordinator says, well, we were concentrating on Stroud. This happens twice. when you know what you're going to get on Sunday, when you know you're going to get a heavy dose of the running game, a heavy dose of Josh Jacobs because you have the backup quarterback under center without the availability, I think still presumably, but whatever, of Jordan Love, you know what you're going to get. You cannot let that happen. Josh Jacobs is really good, but you cannot let that happen because then you start positioning yourself as, well, maybe they're more like this. Maybe they're more like this than they were about this so-called top 10. And then people argued to me top 5 defensive line. You might be able to one-off that on rattling last week's quarterback, but the quarterback should come out there ready-made to be rattled at Lambeau Field coming up on Sunday. You just can't lose your ass against the run like you did in week number 1. Just can't happen. Not on any stinking level. Because then all of a sudden you start to form into what people believe you to be now. And believe me, with that group, if they fail that miserably again, it's more than just the fault of the coordinator. It just will be. While he is going to be the major focus and always will be, certainly, you got to start looking at some of these guys that got paid, some of these guys that are foundational pieces that have earned the trust of the general manager in building that team, this defense, the way that he has. You got to go out there and, dare I say, flip the script completely. That has to happen. There are no excuses. I know that you can drop some excuses that are accurate. Like, I want to go back to the sound of Shane Steichen when he said at the end of that, you can't predict the injuries. Well, yeah, you're right. But if you were going to guess, and I'm assuming these guys all have about basically anything a very educated guess, more educated than us, right? You've got to be more educated in the guess department than us because we're not at all educated. We read, we watch, we pay attention, but we're not on the inside. You have to have more of an educated opinion on what might happen and what might be. And believe me, with that situation again, it just looks like that you're unprepared. You look at what you're bringing up and talking about the young guys that you like. But I'm assuming one of those young guys that you like is JuJu Brents, and now he's on the IR. Seems like you would always protect yourself, even if philosophically you have a belief in, quote, your guys. There's another term right there, your guys. Yeah, your guys better pick you up. Gus Bradley's guys better pick him up coming up on Sunday. I know, that's a mouthful of defense right there. We could talk with you about it, 239-1070. If you so desire, I'm sure we'll probably muddle into the little bit of the offensive scenario, too. I can't lie, I get a little bit swept up. Yeah, people ask me all the time, what do you think about Anthony Richardson? I go out playing hoop last night. Yeah, surprisingly enough, I did not stay home and watch the debate. So going out and playing hoop last night, people ask. And I do get, maybe starstruck is the wrong way to put it. But the athletic gifts I see, it is definitely an oh wow to me. While I understand at the same time there are more things than just that, sometimes that can overtake me. You know what I mean? Trying to think of a really good movie nudity analogy to come up with right here. It's failing me a bit. I guess you could get for example, if I'm talking to you dudes out there, we could get a really sweet semi-nude scene and completely forget at that moment why this person may have won an Academy Award, right? That's kind of how I view that. For the moment when you throw it 60 yards in the air and everybody's going crazy. Did you guys see the video yesterday of Joe Flacco on the bench at Colts.com? Oh, my God. You got to be kidding me. So I do readily admit I kind of get swept away on that a little bit, but I still I still completely understand how he has to become more well-rounded. And for those of you out there that are either non-believers or on the fence, and really I think we're probably all a little bit on the fence because you still have to prove a lot more. I mean, hell, you have to prove you can be out there still. And what the timetable that I prescribed for you was going through November, and hell, it may be even longer than that for you. But basically, you got to prove you can be out there. But those moments where you get that oh wow play, they will carry some weight. And believe me, with a national perspective, a national coverage angle, whomever we're talking about, that is really going to take them. You know, those that break down the film or say they break down the film, they're probably going to be breaking down those huge plays, but maybe not so much the plays that didn't work out. Those are the ones that we end up seeing and we end up talking about more. Let's face it, that 60-yarder was incredible, but a lot of you ended up talking more about those misses. You know, the misses from 15 yards away, the misses from 24, or I should say 20 yards away. We ended up talking more about that. And what that comes from is this, because you're close to it. You know, everybody else just kind of swoops in and, oh, wow, here's an update for you from Indy, a 60-yard bomb off a back foot from Anthony Richardson. And that's what these guys are going to see. That's what these guys are going to talk about, whereas we saw the entirety of the game. You saw the entirety of the game, and you also understand that there still needs to be more of a not-so-delicate balance between the two. And there's nothing wrong with it. That's just the truth. But the oh wow is always going to carry a great deal of weight. Like somebody may go out there in an NBA game and, you know, throw it down 15 different ways, athletically speaking, and dunking the basketball, and then go out there and throw up some bricks from the free throw line. That's a pretty good sports analogy, too. And as I've said regarding Richardson, you want to see him become more acclimated and grow into being able to make those layups. Make those free throws. All right, we can talk about that at 239-1070 as well. Colts, Packers coverage for you coming up on Sunday morning, 10 a.m. in the morning for the Colts pregame huddle. I shall be here along with Bill Brooks, and I believe the Gorman as well at Lambeau Field in Green Bay. And we have a lot to talk about in the latter portions of the week. Tomorrow, Coach's Tavern, Larceny Bourbon Locks, Luna Azul Tequila Shots for week number 2. At the Bills and the Dolphins, the Thursday nighter on Prime. We'll get that game and everything else in week number 2 with our betting analyst, Brent Halverson, tomorrow. Just downtown here with Tommy S. and Coach's Tavern. That is tomorrow. Ale Emporium, Bud Light Blue Friday, Bears tickets. I don't know if you've noticed the Bears tickets per normal. Those things are going to be tough to come by. And you know what makes it even sweeter? It's even sweeter if you were to happen to win them. So your chance at the Ale Emporium Bud Light Blue Friday coming up in Castleton on Friday, that is your chance to win. Bears, Colts tickets coming at you. Cannot wait to see you there for those couple of events. That's going to be a good time. At the Fever coming up later on tonight. The Fever and the Aces, I'm telling you, we always end up creating new benchmarks. You know what I mean by that? New benchmarks. Like, I literally said this morning. I said, Laney had practice. I think I told Jake that like 5:45 or 6 a.m. at CG. I said, hey, you know what? I'll run home tonight, and I'll put some bison on the grill, James. Laney digs on bison like her dad. I'll put some bison on the grill, and we'll watch the Fever. I mean, there is literally no way a year ago or basically any year prior to that I would have said anything like it. I will say that it feels good, but it is still a whoa. Because honestly, you get the Vegas Aces in town and Asia Wilson, I go, oh. It has not totally taken place, for example, of my love for the NBA or my love for basketball in general, but it's right there. Like normally this time of year, I miss basketball. I miss the NBA. You know, you wait for the start of college basketball. And believe me, the NBA is always going to be a little bit ahead. But you just sit around and you wait for it. And full disclosure, my basketball appetite has been satisfied this mid to late summer to now early fall before things officially get underway, for example, in the NBA. I never thought I would say that. And I am. Yeah, Asia Wilson, 27 and a half and nearly 12 rebounds a game. That's your MVP. And you got kind of an odd baseball-like back-to-back, a Wednesday and a Friday, same two teams at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. How you like that? We'll talk about that. I'm sure James Boyd has something to say about that from The Athletic coming up here at the bottom of the hour. I did want to mention this as well. This date in history, certainly as profound as any date in any of our history. September the 11th, 2001. I know I'm speaking to a lot of people from various eras. You may have been in grade school. You may have been even younger than that. Maybe you're my age. And I always bring this up because this was, I mentioned yesterday 20, 21 years, whatever it is. I say 20 years. My 20 years of doing this show. Prior to that, I was the producer for Mark Patrick and Mark Patrick on Sports, as we called MPOS. And the morning on September 11th, 2001, when the attacks on the World Trade Center, various spots around the country, the Pentagon, and then ultimately what happened over the skies of Pennsylvania and the crash in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, all was unveiled right before our shocked and dismayed eyes. And if you do a sports show, and I was just a producer, I just sat there and helped out Mark, but if you do a sports show, how can you possibly do a sports show? And I sat there at 3 o'clock when we started. Again, on this day 23 years ago, I sat there and I watched Mark, I thought, and I still think to this moment, have the greatest radio show that I have ever heard. And I know I have certain limitations. I actually have very profound limitations. But the way that he handled it, and it was more than just reporting, but it was an incredibly soothing voice for all the moments where all these feelings were so incredibly raw. And it was a time, everybody was on the same team then. And it wasn't about sports. It was real life. And I still think to this day, as long as I've done this job, I can never do anything like that. That is still the greatest radio show that I've ever heard. But there was something soothing about it. In moments in which you thought that there was no such thing. So I certainly will always remember that and remember this date. I mean, I talk about all the time how talented Mark was, but on that particular day, he was as talented and as human as anybody on the radio that I've ever heard. And it still amazes me all these years later as, again, moments like that and certainly the incredible loss we will never forget. All right, quick break. We'll come back. James Boyd, bottom of the hour. Green Bay update coming up. Charles Arbuckle, a former UCLA tight end with IU and UCLA, coming up on Saturday. Talk about that and more college football with Charles. Kevin Bowen's going to be here as well. We got a lot of stuff to get to on this day. Don't go anywhere. The stream, the app, it is HD Radio inside the AAA membership lounge via YouTube Live at 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
The Ride with JMV.
It's 106 miles to Chicago. We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
A little House of Pain from James right there. Two shows coming up tomorrow and Friday. Tomorrow, Coach's Tavern downtown. Week 2, Large City Bourbon Locks, Luna Azul Tequila Shots. Betting analyst Brent Halverson and Tommy S. Coach's Tavern would love to see you tomorrow. Bears Colts tickets on Bud Light Blue Friday. Ale Emporium in Castleton would also love to see you there. Bowen, top of the hour. Charles Arbuckle, college football analyst, former UCLA Bruin tight ends, going to join us at 4:30 today, too. Meantime, 239-1070 if you guys want to jump on board as we right now go to the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline from The Athletic. It is James Boyd. Hello, James. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I think a large part of what Shane Steichen had to say about the secondary, the pieces, the inexperience was all accurate. I would suggest this, however. With the recent history of injury to JuJu Brents, you might have maybe erred a little bit more on the side of, I think, a veteran-level caution, given the fact you just don't see him or haven't seen him enough because of injuries. However, it just seems like that this team, from top to bottom right now, James, they believe in the youth, the inexperience, and the depth that they have, even if we don't.
I mean, you have to at this point. You made your bed when you didn't go out and get a veteran. And so it's unfortunate that JuJu went down, but it is football. It's a physical sport. So at some point you had to kind of know maybe our contingency plan is Dallas Flowers coming off an Achilles injury, but maybe not the best contingency plan to have. So personally, I think that the decision that they made was a poor one, and it came back to bite them a lot sooner than I expected. I can't predict injuries, of course. But now their best option is either to play Dallas Flowers, who was a healthy scratch last week, or you end up shuffling a bunch of guys around and trying to, Band-Aid it that way.
Regarding, unfortunately, JuJu Brents, I think everybody was kind of right. You just kind of waited on it, and until he proves he can remain out there or remain healthy, that's how you're going to feel. It seems like in recent history, James, with that and some other things in mind, the fans and oftentimes the media turn out to be accurate when the team isn't, and that is never a good combination, decision-making wise.
No, not at all. I think this is one where Chris Ballard really has to look in the mirror and say, hey, I just didn't do enough. This was a drum that we pounded all summer. The secondary is inexperienced. They are young. What happens if there's an injury? And then case in point, the injury happens, and now you're kind of reeling, and it's only week 2 of the season. So I'm curious to see how they respond. I think that this game they have coming up is a bit of a silver platter game. You're going to face a quarterback most likely on Malik Willis, who isn't a great passer, so maybe that doesn't stress your secondary as much as another quarterback like Jordan Love would. But long-term wise, it's a big blow for this team, and it's something that they can't necessarily outrun or get a break from every single week. So, again, unfortunate. And, there are plenty of fans who expressed frustration after the news came out yesterday and made their case. And a few of them I even responded to on Twitter, and I said, hey, I can't argue with you because you're right.
Yeah. You just that can't happen. It is become all too familiar around here. James Boyd of The Athletics on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. I did want to get to the defense you're talking about. You described it as a silver platter type of situation without Jordan Love. And we heard from Gus Bradley yesterday where their intent, their focus was to rattle C.J. Stroud. And while they got to him Sunday, he didn't look very rattled as an end result. And ultimately what it ended up costing them was just being gashed running the football. And I kind of put it this way, James. I said, this to me is also about the players. And if you do this when Malik Willis is the quarterback, and let's just say Josh Jacobs has a really strong game to back up what Houston did, this all of a sudden now becomes more about who you are than about those issues that led to a certain situation being better than you thought it was going to be. I think this is a hell of a gauge type of defensive game for this Colts team on Sunday.
Absolutely. It's no secret that Green Bay is going to try to run the ball. That's what they should do, given Malik Willis's track record as a quarterback in this league. The last time he started a game was back as a rookie. He went 1-2, completed about 50% of his passes, threw 3 interceptions, no touchdowns, did not have a good performance. And you have Josh Jacobs in the backfield, who 2 years ago was a league rushing champ. So they're going to rely on the run game for sure. And for the Colts, you backed up the Brinks truck this offseason to pay these guys, to get Grover Stewart to come back. You extended DeForest Buckner. You extended Zaire Franklin. And you brought in Raekwon Davis, and you let a team come into your house last week and trash the place. I mean, they were rude guests. They knocked everything off the coffee table. They went in your freezer and ate all your pizza up and, pizza rolls, whatever else. And now you got to go to Green Bay and I think reestablish what this team was built on. And it was built in the trenches on the defensive line. And if you cannot stop the run, which is a huge, phrase we hear all the time in football, if you can't do that, you can't win. And so I think that they have, again, an opportunity to redeem themselves. It's early. I'm not going to freak out or panic. However, there is, reason to maybe kind of raise your eyebrows a little bit, because what I saw this past Sunday was just not what I expected at all from a team that had been pretty good in the run defense last year.
Hey, James, to you last week, was it more about the way things were put together by Gus Bradley, the defensive coordinator, or more about just the way in general, especially up front, the Colts players played? Who was more, you think, problematic, more at fault in giving up what they gave up offensively to the Texans on the ground?
That's a great question. I would probably lean more towards the players, just because you do have to go out there and try to execute whatever game plan you've been given, and to have a performance where you gave up for the first time since 2020, 200 yards passing and 200 yards rushing. That's rough. And looking at some of the tape, it was not good. Zaire Franklin, I don't think he played to the standard he normally would. And I think a few other guys just weren't up to par. And you look at Grover Stewart, getting worked a few times. DeForest Buckner actually had a pretty good game, had the back injury. We'll see how he feels throughout the week. But, again, just certain guys you expect more from didn't really have a big day. E.J. Speed, another guy who usually has that splash play and at linebacker, he was, not really a factor in that game. And so I think it's more so on the players, and they'll probably say that themselves as well. And as far as the coaching staff goes, one of the biggest things I would kind of critique is just how much they platooned different defensive linemen into the game. There were certain times where Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner were both out, and it's like, okay, you're giving them, this green light to run the ball, and guess what they did? They gassed you because your two biggest, and best defensive tackles weren't in the game. And so that has to change for sure, I think, going forward.
So James Boyd of the Athletics on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. All in all, what did you think about the season debut of Anthony Richardson? Because I kind of explained it myself. I can get caught up in the big play moments, and I do get caught up in the big play moments, and I tried to keep an even keel, a balance, because he also, a basketball term here, needs to make the layups as well. But overall, with those big play capabilities and all that encompassed his first start in 2024, what'd you think?
I think it was a pretty good performance, all things considered. I know the completion percentage was not good, 48%, 9 of 19. He also had the interception with Colin Granson, where it looked like Colin Granson slipped, but even then, Anthony kind of threw it high, or so he said. There were some misfires throughout the game for sure, but I think when you know what he was going to bring to this team and some of the erratic play, this was one of the best case scenario games for him. He gave you 3 passes, 3 completions of over 50 yards, brought you back time and time again late in the game with some big-time plays, had a huge 4th down run at the goal line. And so I thought he had a pretty good game overall, and it was a positive sign, and more of what we saw from last year, to be honest. He kind of like he picked up right where he left off. You want to be more accurate. You want to be more precise. But, again, I think Anthony, did a hell of a job playing quarterback for this team and at least giving them a chance, which is what I can't say the defense really did, in my opinion.
James, with the ineffective, non-productive nature of Jonathan Taylor, which absolutely for this team he has to perform at a much higher level, was that to you more on the play calling that kind of set him up the offensive line maybe not doing what they needed to do to get him set up, or just in general more on Jonathan Taylor in week number 1?
Yeah, I think the offensive line could have been a lot better in week 1. I know we saw the great explosive plays. They scored some points regardless, but there were definitely some times where he just didn't have much to work with or many lanes to run through. And I think, you asked a few guys up front, they would say that same thing. I think Ryan Kelly could have been better this past Sunday, and he'll try to bounce back this week as well. But nothing to be too concerned about. I mean, it's, again, just one game. I'm trying to overreact to one game. It's a super, super, super small sample size. But for a guy who just got paid or has that payday kicking in this year with the extension of Jonathan Taylor, with all the hype that you got from Chris Ballard saying he's going to have a hell of a year, and the excitement of being paired with Anthony Richardson, it was surprising to see him not have more production in week 1. So we'll see. But again, it's early. I'm not going to hit the panic button just yet. But I will say, though, they have to go out there and win this upcoming week. If you drop this game against a backup quarterback, that to me would be a very, very egregious loss, and something that would be very, very hard to swallow, and a lot harder to swallow, quite frankly, than the week 1 opener that you lost.
Hey, James, a quick close with you here. Is tonight the game of the year so far for the Fever, with the Aces in town for back-to-backs?
I would think so. I've been talking about this all day with some of the guys in the media room. I think that with this team, you've knocked off pretty much every top team in the league except for this one, and this is your chance to get your lick back. And Asia Wilson's not out anymore. I know she had missed a couple games with ankle injury. She's back in the lineup. They're at full strength, and you'll have a chance to kind of prove yourself. So I'm excited for it. I'll be going tonight to watch the game, and we'll see what happens. But to me, just get a split, whether you win tonight or win Friday. You want to try to get one game off of this team to give you that confidence going forward. And if anything, they've kind of shown you what the blueprint kind of looks like. They got a couple of number 1 picks in a row, and you look up a few years later, they're WNBA champions, and so that's the path the Fever want to kind of chase and follow. So we'll see. And then for the MVP talks, I mean, hey, if you can go out and win a game or two against the Aces, and Caitlin Clark has a big performance, it ruffles a few feathers and throws her name even more into the MVP conversation.
It's James Boyd of The Athletic, covers both the Colts, the Fever. It covers everything around here. He's on the Andy Moore.
Look, man, I get it in where I can. Whenever they give me a check, I'm going.
Dude, let me tell you this. I hooped last night until 11:15. What do you think about that? Come on now.
I think you're the man. I think you get me, man. Sometimes you got to have a little hoop therapy, as I call it. The buckets never leave you.
No question. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
All right, man. You have a good one.
And it's James Boyd on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. I mentioned the obvious significance of this date. In baseball history, especially around here, this date also holds significance. And Matt LaFleur, a little bravado in talking about Jordan Love. We talking gamesmanship or truth? That on the other side, don't go anywhere. Kevin Bowen, top of the hour. 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
The Ride with JMV.
Joey, have you ever been in a Turkish prison?
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Oh, good song right there, man. That's Angry Chair, right? That's good stuff. Lane Staley, everybody. I might be able to do a Lane Staley with my voice the way that it is right now. At this date in baseball history, 1985. Anybody remember the significance of 1985 on this date? I'm sitting at home in Owensboro, Indiana, watching Pete Rose. Pete Rose became the hit king. 41-92. Passing Ty Cobb for the most all-time. Eric Shaw and the San Diego Padres. I believe I'll have to look back at the video. One of the more significant moments is when I believe Bobby Brown, who played, and not that Bobby Brown, not my prerogative Bobby Brown, but baseball player Bobby Brown, I believe that's who it was, came over to shake his hand. Garvey was on first, Steve Garvey at the time, and he certainly did. And then Joe Morgan, the late, great Joe Morgan, was in the broadcast booth at the time, and I remember them grabbing, he and the play-by-play guy grabbed cans of Budweiser and toasted to Pete Rose, setting that record. I believe I was watching that on Channel 4 because in 1985, I still lived in a world of, I think, 5 channels. This date, 1985. Yeah, Bobby Brown, I believe. Look that up on that San Diego Padre roster. A big day for somebody like me that loved baseball, loved the Big Red Machine, along with Pete Rose, Joe Morgan, Tony Perez, Johnny Bench. Yeah, 85 on this date was a hell of a moment. Matt LaFleur, Packers head coach, when asked if the door, James, is open for Jordan Love to play in week number 2. The quote, I'd say it's pretty open. Gamesmanship or for real? Discuss that, Kevin Bowen on the other side. Charles Arbuckle, bottom on the 4 o'clock hour. Stay right there. 93.5, 107.5, The Fan.
Ride with JMV.
And then at that point, Billy, your house started to shake, the heavens opened up, and God himself spoke to you and said this, Bob, but my name's Billy. It doesn't matter what your name is.
93.5 and 107.5, The Fan.
Hey, James, I think we need more wrestling re-entries like that. That stuff's pretty good. I like it. You got anything else in mind? Like, you're a big wrestling guy. Anything come to mind as far as a good re-entry we could use?
Well, I've already got a bunch of Macho Man on there, but The Rock's always good.
The Cream.
Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Is the Cream the greatest one of all time?
That's probably my favorite.
What do we call that?
That's just the cream of the crop.
No, I mean, what do we call what they're doing, what they're performing?
Oh, that's a promo. It's a promo.
They're promos.
Yeah, they're cutting a promo.
So that's the greatest promo of all time? So he's talking to the late Mean Gene Okerlund at the time.
Yeah. It's certainly
the Cream.
It's certainly one of the most viral and funniest, in my opinion.
All right, so the late Macho Man Randy Savage is the Cream, and that was The Rock right there, right?
Yeah, that was The Rock.
What else? What else would you like to add to the list of re-entries?
We could do Austin 316.
All right.
Where it says Austin 316 says, I just kicked your ass.
Okay.
That's a great one.
Good.
I'd have to there's probably some from Hulk Hogan.
Who's
I'd have
the guy
to
that
look
used to
through.
say damn all the time? Damn!
Oh,
Ron something.
Ron. I'd have to look up his name. I know exactly who you're talking about. He was with the APA for a while.
So Calvin Fitch, listener to the show, friend of the show, from Yingling, has shared that sound clip that we re-entered took place at Market Square Arena.
The My Name's Billy?
Yeah.
It may actually
It
have.
wouldn't have been MSA, because that was too early.
By the way,
I don't know.
Ron Simmons, by the way.
Ron Simmons. So maybe Calvin Fitch would know, though. Was that at Market Square or was that at the Field House?
I'll have to look that up real quick.
When did The Rock start wrestling?
That was like mid to late-ish 90s. He didn't have a very long full-time run before he got famous and went off to start doing movies.
I got on a JMV takeover vintage indie. Now I can't remember who it is now. Is it Electric Steve Regal that I have doing one of those promos about wrestling Abdullah the Great at the Big Red Barn in Zionsville? That's a big damn deal right there. The Big Red Barn in Zionsville. You could occasionally hear that on Vintage Indie Saturday night on the JMV Takeover. And this is interesting, too. Are you going to Lambeau this weekend? I'm taking my first trip there this Sunday, also added by Calvin. Have you ever been to Lambeau Field?
No, but I'm going to the game.
Oh,
on
yeah,
Sunday.
you are going, aren't you?
Yeah,
so you and Calvin need to meet up right there.
Yeah.
Would you rather go to Lambeau for this game this weekend, or somebody give you a Lambo, as in a Lamborghini, for the weekend to drive? What would you rather do?
I'd honestly probably rather go to the game because I think I'd probably wreck the Lamborghini or something.
Gotcha. Understand. July 11th, 1999 was the date of that soundbite. July 11th, 1999. All right, Andy Moore, Automotive Group Hotline, waiting very patiently. He is part of the morning wake-up call with KB and Andy. Weekday mornings, 7 until 10 a.m. The KB portion is Kevin Bowen on the Andy Moore Automotive Group Hotline. Would you rather go see the Colts at Lambeau this weekend or have the services to drive a Lamborghini this weekend?
I love James's answer saying that he would opt for the former because he's nervous he'd crash. I'm not a big car guy, but I have been to Lambeau, so I guess I would opt for the car. But if I hadn't been to Lambeau, I think I actually would go with the former. Yeah, Lambeau's a must. It's an absolute must. Awesome. Love the neighborhood feel. It honestly is a little reminiscent for me of like Speedway the morning of the 500. Just especially when you get into like the neighborhood aspect, I guess, of the west side, north side of the Speedway, and just such a cool vibe. And it was a beautiful November day. It was great. They got the skinny little visitor tunnel. Lambeau's got no corporate feel whatsoever inside once you get in there. And now, honestly, that was probably one of the better wins of the Pagano-Gregson era. Jordan Todman, I remember, took the opening kickback for a touchdown, and
lucked through a couple early picks. They overcame that, and yeah, that was a much needed win for that regime. Granted, it didn't really lead to much that year.
Todman, shout out. That's the first time
Jordan
we've
Todman.
recognized that name in a number of years, Kev.
Yeah, shout out to the Colts had a few random kick return touchdowns. Remember Deji Kareem? You remember that one?
Yes, absolutely.
I think that was Pagano's first game back from leukemia, if I remember correctly there. So, yeah, that was great. It was it's unique. I don't know if it still is at the NFL, but Green Bay's got no hotels big enough, or at least they didn't in 2016, to host an NFL team. So the Colts stayed in Appleton, which I think is like 30 or 40 minutes away.
What do they do, stay in a Super 8 or something like that up there?
Yeah, they're just looking for Cinemax and a free HBO. So, yeah, they were in Appleton and then had to drive over. I think it was a 4:00 game, if I remember correctly. It was great. It was great weather. So James had a blast coming up on Sunday.
Yeah, James is going. Now, you think you and I, would it take us a minute to like load ourselves into a Lamborghini? Probably would, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I'm not a huge car guy. I don't think. Are you saying like it would take, like physically it would take us a while to get inside?
Yeah, we get that gull wing door action up and then have to kind of pour ourselves into the seat, I would imagine, a little bit, wouldn't we?
I mean, I have a Honda Civic, and I feel like at times I'm climbing Everest trying to get out of it. So that probably tells you more about me than it does the car. But yeah, I don't know if I'd crash it to follow James, but I'd be pretty intimidated by it, I think.
So, Kevin Bowen, the conversation, obviously, with you guys this morning, like it was with me this time yesterday afternoon, surrounds the IR placement, the injury to JuJu Brents, and what we still believe is the lack of preparedness depth-wise. Now, Shane Steichen said today he feels prepared, but I would argue, what else is he going to say? I would also argue, okay, you can't predict injuries, but if you were going to predict one, it wouldn't be too off the beaten path to predict something like this, unfortunately, to JuJu Brents. So I think all the more reason that you go a little bit more in depth in preparing for such a situation. And I know the Colts think they did, but let's face it, they didn't, and we'll see how that ends up working out.
Yeah, maybe because we keep on talking about cars and crashing, that analogy kind of comes into play here. But, there's a little bit of you can't predict injuries. Well, insurance costs different for someone that's been in 5 wrecks and 7 speeding tickets than it does for, a perfect record driver. And unfortunately, JuJu's injury history just can't be ignored. At least it shouldn't be ignored. And again, you feel awful for him because some of these injuries do feel like they're freak accidents, but at that position where even a little injury can really lead to something, because you're out there on an island, you are exposed a whole lot. It's just, to me, it's just absolute malpractice for how they've operated in the secondary. And, oftentimes with you, John, or certainly on the morning show, I've pointed out, there are multiple layers to the secondary question this offseason now into the season. One would be are they good enough? Is Nick Cross good enough? Is JuJu Brents good enough? Is Jalen Jones good enough? That's their level of play when healthy is one side of it. The other side is health. And JuJu Brents is hurt. And look at today's injury report. Julian Blackmon's out with the shoulder injury. So your two most injured guys, the two guys you've had the question marks the most about in the secondary, one is now lost for potentially the rest of the season, and then we'll obviously monitor Julian's status, but you just can't ignore the back of the baseball card. And, again, that's why I call it malpractice. That's why I call it confusing and head-scratching and all of it because, for a staff, like every NFL staff, that preaches competition to the, umpteenth level, to not have insurance necessary to get through a 17-game season at that spot, let alone competition, is a bit mind-boggling.
There have been a number of times that us, you, me, those that cover the team, talk about the team, write about the team, and the fans have been accurate about situations where decision-making wise, the Colts and Chris Ballard, they haven't been accurate about it. And that has to take its toll right here. Are people paying attention? to stuff like that. And I guess still going into week 2, and we'll see how it works out. More than likely, I guess, Matt LaFleur is leading on as if it's still in question. But let's just say, for example, Malik Willis is under center, as we expect on Sunday. We'll see what happens with that. But at the same time, you talk about it being malpractice. It doesn't make any stinking sense to me, because you've got money, and I know that you got an X message from a guy that sent something to me yesterday. Bob Kravitz has been investigating whether or not Jim Irsay is more behind the tightening of the purse strings than Chris Ballard is with believing in your own and not wanting to dabble into free agency. So all of this, I think, with that comes in to question, and in large part at a moment in which the Colts don't want it to.
Yeah, and I guess that last part, John, of it doesn't make sense is probably why I've been maybe even extra kind of up in arms about it. Because, there's been times where I've disagreed with Ballard before, and I at least can kind of understand where his thinking is. And today, for example, I felt a little bad asking Shane those questions, but right now he's the voice of the franchise. It's probably more of a Ballard question. But again, Shane is a spokesperson once you get into the season, and Shane's answers, they don't make sense because yes, you can't predict injuries, but you can have insurance at premium positions where you have been off injured, and it's not like you're proven commodities there. You aren't whatever DeForest Buckner, Quentin Nelson, or Jonathan Taylor, or some of these other areas. So I don't get it. The Colts at times have had secondary insurance and have had guys that I don't think you would call them blockbuster moves end up being very important pieces for them in a season. Mike Adams in the secondary, Rodney McLeod in the secondary, Mike Mitchell in the secondary, even a corner, a Pierre Desir or a TJ Carey. And none of these guys, you or I talked about for more than 5 minutes the next day after they were signed, but they all, became, important Band-Aids during their time here in Indy. So, again, this is where, none of that happened. I mean, they made no secondary move, corner, safety of note at all. The only two things they did of somewhat substance would be a fifth-round pick in Jalen Simpson and a sixth-round pick in Micah Abraham. Both of them were cut, and in Simpson's case, he actually was making a position switch from safety to corner. So, and even if you want to look at the draft, I mean, you waited 150, 170-some spots before you even took – I think they drafted, I want to say 6 or 7 guys before they drafted someone in the secondary. So, yeah, I would say it's equally as dumb as it is confusing, if I could probably paint it in a simple light.
But is there, besides confusing and dumb, is there something that's even more deeply rooted? Would you buy – Kravitz and I got in the conversation about whether or not, maybe there is – much more of a budget now than there has been prior, with all the bravado and all the talk that hasn't worked. Do you believe in that on any level?
Yeah, I can listen to it to a degree. I mean, they reportedly made a huge offer for Danielle Hunter. And so, again, there's part of me that can believe it. There's part of me that can't really believe it. And I guess to kind of go back to the point I was trying to make, I don't think I probably made it very well, but I'm not saying you need to go resurrect the careers of, Bob Sanders and Ronnie Lott or, whatever, give Justin Simmons quarterback money. It's even a little insurance. I mean, that's not breaking the bank. That's not, causing Jim Irsay to sell a guitar or two. I mean, that's not doing any of that stuff. It is simply giving a position of major question some insurance policies. And in today's NFL, where you play defensive backs more and more, I tend to think you probably should have insurance there as opposed to a 10th defensive lineman or a 10th offensive lineman. They've got 20 dudes in the trenches. 10 of the 47 guys who wore a Colts jersey on Sunday play the defensive line, and we saw how they stopped the run. So, again, it's just is there some of it from Irsay? Sure. I think there's some of it is also major core beliefs of Chris Ballard, too, so maybe they are kind of in a little bit of a handshake, but I don't think this is you can't go out there and get that insurance policy at safety for $2.2 million. You cannot do that. No, I maybe I'm dead wrong, but I would be stunned if those are the orders from the top down.
Yeah. It's, Kevin Bowen, morning wake-up call, KB and Andy's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. You mentioned Julian Blackmon did not participate in practice today. You already know about JuJu Brents from yesterday as well. What do you think about the probability, again, in a secondary that is highly questionable, even if it wasn't the focus of a debacle of sorts defensively last weekend?
Yeah, I mean, Julian Blackmon, I didn't spot him at practice either. Sometimes it's, hey, our guy's at practice watching, like Quiddy Pay was at practice watching. I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into some of that stuff, but, they all are certainly worth monitoring here the next couple of days. I mean, specifically Blackmon, I think you can make the argument. He, again, is one of the more important players on the entire roster, and they signed Ronnie Harrison Jr., for what it's worth, to the practice squad. They brought him back today. So, again, do you read into that a little bit more as a safety need? That'll be something to keep an eye on. Probably it's unfair to, JuJu Brents to say the best news about the Brents injury. Obviously, there's no good news about the injury. If you want to be a little bit optimistic, though, it does come at a point in time in the schedule where you should not be tested very much at all from an air attack standpoint these next couple weeks. I mean, who knows? Maybe Caleb Williams will find something a week from Sunday against you, but Malik Willis, Caleb Williams, and Justin Fields don't qualify as that. Like, if you look at October, November, you have many more of those quarterbacks that will test you. Trevor Lawrence and C.J. Stroud again, and Tua and Josh Allen and Jared Goff, Aaron Rodgers. Like, you have a little bit more of that. Again, these next couple weeks you shouldn't. So I don't know if you'll immediately feel the brunt of it. If you do, that's probably not good at all. But I don't think you should be tested in those areas here the next couple weeks.
All right, Josh Downs, limited in participation. There was some discussion about last week. Obviously did not play. Where are we going with this leading up to Sunday in Green Bay?
Yeah, threw out some percentages he did earlier today. Felt like he was 70% last week, 80, 90 this week. Really wants to make sure that he's not thinking about the ankle as he's cutting. And, obviously, when you're a slot wideout, you are doing a ton of that in terms of a lot of kind of underneath routes and things like that. So, there's part of me that thinks, I would take a 90% Josh Downs, but, if you are worried about aggravation or things like that, maybe you hold off one more week. I mean, today was his first practice in 5 weeks. So I think when you get into these month-plus situations, I've seen guys on both ends, guys that just need a week of practice and then they're good to go, and others that want more than a week of practice before they're good to go. And Downs obviously is a really important piece. I think he's an important piece in an area where Anthony Richardson does need to make a jump from week one, and that's just becoming a steadier, more accurate kind of underneath thrower. I think Downs has a great rapport with Anthony Richardson, and I think would aid in that particular area. So, yeah, I mean, obviously good sign that he's out there today, but, I don't think it's an outright slam dunk. I mean, Buckner, he's never missed a game due to injury with the Colts. It's a back issue. I don't think you love back injuries at all, especially for 300-pounders near the age of 30. But, he's proven he can be a pitch count guy before, and so, maybe he's in a little bit of that role coming up on Sunday.
It's Kevin Bowen with us. Obviously Matt LaFleur is using the gamesmanship. Let's just say, for the sake of this question right now, it is Malik Willis on Sunday. I know everybody's all over Gus Bradley, and obviously rightly so as the defensive coordinator, what they gave up front, rushing-wise, to the Texans last weekend. This seems like a situation here. Let's just say if you have Malik Willis, for example, it's going to be a heavy indictment if Josh Jacobs runs wild on a defensive line that a lot of people called top 10, maybe even top 7 type of caliber. This is a huge test for them coming up on Sunday, is it not?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I mean, it's I think I looked it up. I mean, if you take linebackers into it too, I mean, it's spent about $150 million on your front seven this offseason in terms of extensions and, a new contract. And, again, that doesn't even take into account the major draft picks that have been used on a lot of those guys. So, yes, I thought probably the most embarrassing part to Sunday was, and I guess I hit on this a little bit earlier, but just to go back to it, was what you allowed in the fourth quarter. Because theoretically, by the Colts dressing 10 defensive linemen in a game, they're saying, hey, we're going to outlast you. We're going to be able to team that will be fresher in the second half and third and fourth quarter, again, in the trenches. This is why we are doing that. We're going to play in waves, et cetera, et cetera. Well, when that game gets to the fourth quarter and C.J. Stroud, I think he only threw 5 passes in the fourth quarter. So, it's not like they were a heavy air attack at all. While they were trying to grind it out, 4-minute offense to you, et cetera, I mean, they just ran it right at you. I mean, it was, bully ball. It was, they're running it, and we're still running it. I think it was 80 rushing yards in the fourth quarter. That's the most embarrassing. The overall thing, it was embarrassing, but that is extra embarrassing, considering that everyone in the building knew at that point, especially in those, first, second downs, and even the third and shorts, that they were going to run it. But, yeah, I mean, if you would have told me at the start of the season, hey, Joe Mixon, Josh Jacobs, first 2 weeks, one of these dudes is going to go off, I would have assumed Jacobs much more than Mixon. I think Jacobs at times has done that here in recent years, where I don't think Mixon has really had any of that. So, it'll be a little bit of a different look quarterback-wise. I mean, I do get that at times on Sunday you obviously were defending a really, really potent passing attack, and Green Bay certainly does not have that, so it's not like, you need to have a ton of attention towards that. But, yeah, if Josh Jacobs goes off, then you have a real problem. I think the Colts deserve a little benefit of the doubt of, I don't think that's the norm. Run defense and run offense, Jonathan Taylor with 3 yards per carry, that's where my gut tells me. But if all of a sudden it happens anywhere near the same sort of, circumstance that happened on Sunday, then it's a different issue.
So Kevin Bowen. What did I say? Boney? Kevin Boney of the morning wake-up call here. Let me change your name really quick.
Sound like Borning. Sound like maybe you need to
I
call
almost said
Boner,
I think. I almost said Kevin. I almost said Kevin Boner, I think. And I would, if I were you, I would think about changing my name to that.
Well, it's funny. As I sit here right now, I'm currently getting ready to pick up my children from daycare.
They're not in the car yet, are they? I apologize if they are.
Thankfully, they're not. There are a lot of
morning wake-up call with Kevin Boner. Yes, we're going to change your name altogether. Hey, I did want to get this to you before we part here. Fever and the Aces. I can't remember a time, because it's never happened, that I told my daughter when I dropped her off at practice this morning, hey, come over tonight, or come to the house tonight, and we'll be watching some Fever and the Aces. It's a big game. Big game, no doubt about that. I've never done that before. I am kind of curious. Is this the biggest game of the season, or am I dealing in a world of hyperbole right now?
Well, yes, probably hyperbole. It's the biggest game because I think Asia Wilson's in town, and they're the defending champs. I mean, she is the Patrick Mahomes of the NFL. I mean, she's of the WNBA. I mean, she's the heavy favorite to win MVP. So, yeah, if you want to look at it from that standpoint, first time you've played them all year, Lynn Dunn reminded us this morning that that's the only team that the Fever have yet to beat this season. But in terms of, mattering for the playoffs, not really. I mean, if the Fever do, run the table, they got 4 left. And if Vegas actually, loses out, I think they could get some home floor action in the playoffs. There's some home court in round 1. But, yeah, it's no, I don't think it's at that magnitude. I mean, it's big, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's remember when the Pacers played the Heat late in the year on that Sunday? I mean, it was a huge game for the standings and everything. I don't think we're at that.
All right, what you guys got coming up tomorrow morning?
What do we have tomorrow morning? We're getting a little Green Bay action from that side. Gary Danielson joining us Friday. We'll tease if I could go out one more day. So him and Brad Nessler on the call. When's the last time you think Purdue and IU have been on CBS and NBC in the same weekend?
1992.
Yeah, I guess I should probably know the answer before I ask the question. I have no idea.
I don't know.
It strikes me as not many times. So I think it's guy on the call.
Well, I guess 92 when IU played Notre Dame, and I think that's when Thomas Lewis, the wide receiver, have a big game and still lost. And I remember that because the late Bill Walsh was the color analyst, and he kept referring to IU's offensive and defensive lines as, quote, smallish by college standards. Smallish lines. Were you born yet?
Guys on the call.
Were you born yet?
I was 3. Yeah,
Okay.
I was born in 89.
That's a tough recollection right there, buddy.
Noah Eagle on the call Saturday night. Your guy there. I have enjoyed those Noah Eagle combos when you have had him, and Ian Eagle. The Eagles just seem like great dudes.
They are. They can hang. They can hang with anything.
100%.
And you can tell, like father, like son on that, too, because Ian, there's no better hang than that.
Yeah, I would agree on that. So, so we got Gary Danielson, obviously, back on his own stopping grounds there. Him and Brad Nessler on the call for Purdue and Notre Dame. So, looking forward to that combo. I think at 7:40 on Friday.
My bad on the boner thing. I hope this doesn't start anything for you tomorrow morning.
Hopefully it doesn't start anything for me tonight. If I'm going to be honest, I don't think anyone's called me boner since I was 17 years old, and now I feel like
has anybody ever like just in a mean-spirited or / joking way referred to you as Kevin Boner?
No, I don't think in a mean-spirited way. I think it's more, obviously my friends, a lot of them would call me Bowen back in the day, and, I certainly can think of now several that are popular. I'm going to have to whip out the yearbook here that now would, all of a sudden, Boner!
I hope I didn't start anything right here. My bad. My bad if I did.
Would be like, teachers would be like, wait, what did you say? And they'd be like, Bowen. I'm just calling him by his last name, I mean, you know how teenage humor works, so.
Yeah. I appreciate it. No, do
Leave
not.
It to you and your Eastern Green mind to go back there.
I don't know what's happening here. It's sad. It is sad. All right, buddy. I appreciate it. Hopefully you're not going to get a bunch of flack for that.
All good, John.
Take it easy. Kevin Bowen. He's the KB portion of KB and Andy, the morning wake-up call. It is 7 until 10 a.m. here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Friend of the show, Charles Arbuckle, the former UCLA tight end, coming up on the other side. We'll talk a little IU, UCLA, his alma mater, and some more college football with Charles. That's next.
The Ride with JMV.
I am the cream, yeah. The cream of the crop. And there is no one that does it better.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Bowen podcast, 107.5thefan.com. Well, Green Bay Packer news. Matt LaFleur serious. You think about Jordan Love's participation on Sunday? Top of the hour, we got that for you on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline right now at Charles Arbuckle on the social media platform X. Coaching, leadership, broadcaster, college football analyst, speaker, all-around good dude, the former Colts and at UCLA tight end Charles Arbuckle joins us now. Hello, Charles. How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I should mention you were growing up in Houston. I saw you actually send out an X message about it, the passing of the great Frankie Beverly we learned about earlier today. Look at California, Mace. Frankie Beverly was a significant voice of our youth.
Yep, that's right, man. Golly. Now, James Earl Jones first, and now Frankie Beverly. That was a tough one because – you know, he just retired, and it seemed like he was going to go off in the sunset. It seemed like his health was good, but he made a lot of good music. If you were growing up in Houston, Texas, or on that I-10 corridor going over to Beaumont, Port Arthur, you knew Frankie Beverly. It was at every family reunion, anything that was involved, any ride music, it was Frankie Beverly. So, yeah, we're going to miss him. I was talking to one of my buddies about him earlier today and, you know, just reminiscing on all the good music. The music takes you back to those places.
It does. I do that every Saturday night, and I say this all the time. The soundtrack of your life, you may have issues because we all do going on a daily basis, but you can get that momentarily erasing of the issues just by listening to a song or music that takes you back. There's just something extra special about that.
It is. It's crazy you say that. We were at a family reunion, and my 90-plus-year-old great aunt was, doing the second line, and she's leading us out there, and her other cousin, who's like 80-something years old, and it just those things you don't forget because it's all about that music that puts you there and how it takes you to a good place, especially if it's good memories associated with it.
He is Charles Arbuckle with us, the former tight end at UCLA. So interesting. IU on the road at the Rose Bowl coming up on Saturday. And what's your thoughts about this matchup? Kurt Cignetti, Deshaun Foster, and what UCLA and the Hoosiers bring to the football table coming up on Saturday?
You know, my concern with UCLA hasn't changed. Ethan Garbers didn't play particularly well against Hawaii, so they had a bye week. But their offensive and defensive line worried me when they faced JMU West, right? Because Cignetti has got a lot of guys from his JMU team, they were doggone good his time there, and now they're at IU, and they started out just like bludgeoning teams. So it's a little bit of a concern if you're Bruin. I think partly because they look the part against lesser competition, but that's what you're supposed to do when you're playing teams that you should beat. It's always interesting, these early season games, and I've asked a lot of coaches over the last few weeks, what is the biggest difference? What's the biggest jump? And clearly he's been able to take his system and go to IU and meld that with the guys that are there, but also the transfers that have come in. And it seems to be working pretty well. But I think now in this day and age, when you have so many people that are coming into a new program, a new system, it takes probably week 2 to week 3 or game 2 to game 3 before you really see those results. And, Rourke is playing well for him at the quarterback position. Ellison is running the ball well at IU. So it looks like, on paper, it looks like UCLA is going to have their hands full with IU, quite honestly.
What do you think about Deshaun Foster?
I like Deshaun a lot. I've known him. I would go back, and he was a player at the time, and then I know him from his days here and with the Carolina Panthers. The thing I think he's done is he's given the program some energy, which it didn't have in the chip. And I know, he's learning how to be a head coach, but I think anytime you step into that space, you have to do that. And the guys like playing for him, I think he's got what UCLA will have is a very good defense this year. They're going to be salty there. And I think he's smart enough to understand that they're going to have to get some playmakers and get some bulk up on the line of scrimmage. His ability to recruit and really be understand the Bruin culture of getting people in and maybe the academic issues that you sometimes run into, when you're trying to get kids in the school there. I think he understands that, and I think that's the part of they're going to give him enough time to carry that through.
You mentioned Chip Kelly, and you just logically believe UCLA, because there's certainly a lot of glitz to it, as you're an alumni of that, and Southern California, and you mentioned the spark that Foster is giving them now. Why could they not get that to the level in which they wanted to Kelly? Why did that not work?
Well, Chip is a great X and O guy. I mean, he's one of the best that has been around, and you're going to see that at Ohio State. But from a head coaching perspective, where you have to recruit and you have to be engaged and you have to be the face of the program, I don't think he really wanted that anymore. I mean, anytime a guy that's going to leave, one school and go to another for that, is clearly telling you this is not what I want to do. And he seemed apathetic at times around recruiting, thinking, you can just get transfers from Ivy League and then getting some, former 4 or 5 stars. And that's not how you have to do it. You have to really get out there and hustle in this day and age of recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal. I respect Chip for his ability to call plays and scheme things up, but he did not want a head coach, and you could see it. Anybody could see that, and I think that was the best thing for them. The worst part was when he left. He waited so long to leave, but the best part was that he did it, and it allowed them to hire Deshaun Foster, who is a guy that understands and knows what it's going to take to kind of build that program back up.
Is this a good season for UCLA? What can you do about it? But a good season for them to make their transition with their new head coach now to the Big Ten?
Well, the problem is, JMV, SC looks like they're going to be pretty good this year. They look a lot better, and there's always going to be, that's the comparator, right? If SC is starting to play well, which they were very one-sided, they were offensively heavy and good there, but not good defensively. I think they looked the part against LSU. It's early in the season. So if SC rattles off some wins and competes and, looks to win the Big Ten title, and UCLA is struggling at all, that will that'll tell the tale early on. I don't think you can ever look at it and say, is this a good time or a bad time, because that's when they were going to do it. The Pac-12 no longer exists. But I do think they will be competitive, but will that mean 5, 6, 7 wins? I don't know. But SC winning and doing a really nice job against LSU, and if they end up doing that in the conference, that's what UCLA is going to be measured against, in my opinion.
Charles Arbuckle's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Mentioned IU, UCLA. You also alluded to the 2 wins so far by large margins, 31-7 over FIU. Western Illinois, they hung 77. It's the most common, most frequent question asked after a 77-point performance, I would guess, is what did you gain out of it? All right. So Kurt Cignetti has answered that. What did you see from it? What can be learned? And how do you even further legitimize a transition from Western Illinois and doing what they did offensively last week to going on the road, playing at the Rose Bowl, and taking on UCLA on Saturday night?
Well, what I think it does is it gave them a chance to play younger guys who, haven't had a chance to have much time and much shine. And I think that's what you have to look at. I will also say this: their defense is only giving up 10 points, and no matter who you're playing, if you can stop people from scoring, Aiden Fisher has been a tackling machine, and so I think you have to look at that. It allowed them to have a lot of guys playing. They've got 3 guys already in double-digit tackles, and it's only been 2 games in. So I think the thing that they did at JMU is what they're going to do there. They're going to be really good defensively. They're going to be physical, and I think that's what you need if you're IU, right? I mean, when when they've had successful seasons, they beat teams that they didn't anticipate. People didn't anticipate they would beat, but they also won the games that they should win. And I think that's going to be the critical piece for IU if they're ever going to get to a point in the Big Ten where they can consistently be above average. And I think that's the probably what Cignetti has taken from his time at JMU, being a powerhouse at the lower level, and then even coming up to the next level and having success early on, probably gives them a lot of confidence. Now, I will say this, when you have to travel and do all of those things, and that's a long travel route. UCLA is going to have to do it quite a few times. I know they're going back east to New Jersey and a couple other places, Penn State, almost in 2 or 3 weekends and back-to-back. I think that's going to be interesting to watch how that plays out as the season goes on for teams coming from the west going east and the teams going east going west.
So, Charles, Notre Dame and Purdue in West Lafayette at 3:30 coming up on Saturday. And obviously you're staked out in Charlotte, North Carolina. You do and see a lot of ACC games. Did you think Riley Leonard would look as bad to start the season for Notre Dame as he has?
No, I did not. I really thought Riley would have improved as a passer, but it looks like there's some regression there, and it's almost like he doesn't trust himself when you're watching him play. And now let's say this too: Northern Illinois is pretty good, and I think we got to give Thomas Hammock and his crew a lot of credit. And I think it's going to be critical for Notre Dame after having a guy like Sam Hartman who was a guy that could really throw the football and, could do it a lot of different ways for you. And now you have Riley Leonard, who is very athletic, but has not shown that he's a, intermediate passer, a deep ball pass. He just hadn't had consistency. And I think that's the one thing they've got to find something that works for him, because I think sometimes you get coaches that are trying to learn their quarterback, what works for him and what gets him going early is going to be critical. And how can you get him to drive the ball down the field, especially when they get in the red zone? It's going to be one of those things that teams will just start saying, okay, we know he can't throw. We'll put 8 in the box, and we'll force you to beat us. And it'll be the formula that'll just keep showing up until Riley Leonard and Notre Dame figure out how to change that.
Hey, really quickly in closing here, is this a good spot for the Boilermakers to host Notre Dame, or would you question that with the Irish coming off a loss in the capacity in which they lost last weekend?
Yeah, I think the coaches probably have wished that they had a close game and won it or blown Northern Illinois out before they face them. But I will say this, I think you get a team when you get a team. And it's also the flip side for that in Notre Dame. Will they let Northern Illinois beat them twice? Meaning, they were very disappointed after having such a great win the first week of the season. I think Purdue has them in a pretty good spot. And the key is how they start. If Purdue can start fast, then Notre Dame starts questioning, hey, what can we do? And in particular, if Riley Leonard struggles at the quarterback position, that's a Purdue plus, in my opinion, as well.
So Charles Arbuckle, a little college football conversation, especially when it hits pretty close to home right here with his alma mater, UCLA, hosting IU coming up on Saturday night out in Pasadena. Charles, is always on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Man, it is fantastic to hear your voice. We got to do this more often over the course of the college football season, okay?
All right, man. No doubt. Take care now.
Thank you for coming on. Charles Arbuckle on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. At Charles Arbuckle, you can find him on X. Just a really good dude. The former Colts tight end and, of course, a grad of UCLA as a part of that football program. You got IU, UCLA. You got Purdue hosting Notre Dame, among all these other games coming up this weekend. Get you covered right there with Charles Arbuckle on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Quick break, we'll come back. More to come. Sit tight. 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
and 107.5 The Fan.
Tomorrow, Larceny Bourbon Locks, Luna Azul Tequila Shots. Me, Brent Halverson. Brent's going to be happy, too, because James just informed me, as a member of the Believe podcasting network, former Packer running back Amon Green joins us tomorrow. So Amon Green on the show tomorrow. I'm sure Brent Halverson, as a big-time Packer fan, will absolutely love that. Coach's Tavern tomorrow with us, Tommy S., and hopefully with you as well. Why not? Why not? Larceny Bourbon Locks, Luna Azul Tequila Shots tomorrow. Ale Emporium on Friday. Now, I haven't heard otherwise, but I believe this Friday it is going to be the back-to-back Fridays for a Bud Light Blue Friday where we give away Bears-Colts tickets. And, of course, the Week 3 matchup at Lucas Oil Stadium. Ale Emporium, Castleton, Bud Light Blue Friday coming up on Friday. So hope to see you there. Should be a great time. But, again, Bears-Colts tickets, which we know this to be true if you've looked, are very popular right now, leading up to, in this case, week number 3. Aces fever tonight. Asia Wilson, 27.5 and 12 rebounds per game. The MVP of the WNBA in town. Back-to-back Wednesday and Friday with the 22 and 13 Las Vegas Aces and the fever. That tip time tonight is at 7 o'clock. All right, on the other side, little insight regarding the Packers, whether or not there's gamesmanship going on with Jordan Love. Pete Dougherty covers the Packers for the Green Bay Press-Gazette. He is the columnist. We'll talk to Pete coming up on the other side. And you at 239-1070 as well. AAA Membership Lounge via YouTube Live, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
The Ride with JMV.
I don't know what the hell's in there. It's weird and pissed off, whatever it is.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Charles Arbuckle a little bit earlier. Podcast 1075thefan.com. I'm on Green tomorrow. Larceny, Bourbon Locks, Luna Azul Tequila Shots, Coach's Tavern tomorrow. Week 2 starts with the Bills and the Dolphins. Me and our betting analyst Brent Halverson and Tommy Sutton tomorrow with you. Bud Light Blue Friday, Bears Colts tickets at the Ale Emporium coming up on Friday. The Ale Emporium in Castleton, so be ready for that as well. We've got a busy week, a busy weekend for you set as well with the JMV takeover and the Colts pregame huddle. Sunday morning, week 2, 10 a.m. We'll get you started with me, former Colts wide receiver Bill Brooks, and the Gorman as well. Meantime, a little insight on that game. Joining us now, the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline, columnist regarding the Packers, the Green Bay Press Gazette. Pete Dougherty joins us now. Hello, Pete. How are you?
Pretty good. How you doing today?
Pete, are we talking gamesmanship from Matt LaFleur? Is there the most wildest possibility that Jordan Love participates on Sunday? What are we thinking?
I mean, it's got to be gamesmanship, right? I mean, I just don't see any way. I saw where Schefter was on McAfee's show a couple days ago and said that he thinks the guy will be back for the Minnesota game. He didn't cite any sources, but his agent works for the same agency that represents Love. So, that's got to be good information. So I find it hard to believe he would play this week. And it sounded like from the previous reports I'd seen too, probably miss a couple of games, maybe 3, that they were looking on the short end of the 3 to 6 week window.
Yes, Pete Dougherty again covers the Packers on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. So it appears with, I guess, we'll describe it as we know right now, maybe a lot better than what we originally thought on Friday night when that injury at the end of that game occurred. But all in all, was that just a terrible trip to Sao Paulo, Brazil?
Yeah, it was bad. I mean, he didn't have a good game. It's not like they got blown off the field. They lost 31-26. They had their chances. I mean, they got 2 turnovers in the first quarter and got only on that end of the field and still got only 6 points out of the 2 combined. It's a bad trip when you rely on your quarterback and you're paying him, $55 million a year, and he gets hurt and you're not going to have him. But I still think they have to feel really good that, it looked pretty bad. There was reason to think watching that thing. I was thinking, man, he's done for the year, And if he only misses a couple games, and if it doesn't affect him, as the season goes on, then so he misses a couple games, they can overcome that.
Yeah, Pete, a year ago, kind of back and forth the entirety of this season until you get toward actually around Christmas, I believe, a year ago. This team really took off. What was the biggest reason why? Because I think that's what a lot of people felt was going to be the springboard into this year. Even with that playoff loss, obviously, to San Fran, that springboard into 2024 by the way that the Packers played out the season of a year ago. What was the spark in all of that, or at least the biggest deal as to why we saw that consistency of winning late last year?
Yeah, the first half of the season was really rough. I'm thinking they were 2-5 at one point, 3-6 a couple of weeks later, and there were games in there where it was a struggle in the first halves of several games to even get a first down. I mean, it was pretty rough sledding. And about halfway through the year, things started clinking. You knew it was going to be a struggle with the first year starting quarterback. I think what a lot of us didn't appreciate was how hard it would be having both that and their entire receiving and tight ends core were first and second year players. And just to get the timing down between those guys and to get the chemistry, I don't think a lot of us appreciated how hard that part of it would be, beyond just having the young quarterback.
Yeah.
Second half of the season, they started playing better and better. And then down the stretch, I mean, that Dallas game, I don't know if you might not have seen it, but, Love was off the charts in that game. He played okay, played a pretty decent game against San Francisco, too. He just threw horrendous interception, in the final minute.
Well, it's kind of like what and how you want a team that's got a relative unknown to it to start winning games toward the end of the season. And they just, I guess you could argue, the schedule was conducive for it, but you still have to go out there and win the games. And as any team that went into the postseason a year ago, the Packers were at the top of that list, that level of consistently winning and playing as well as anybody at that time.
Yeah, and one thing I didn't mention was, Aaron Jones missed a lot of playing time in the first half of the season too. And that is one super dynamic, really dangerous guy with the ball in his hands. And so his return coincided with the better play, too. I wouldn't underestimate how much that helped Love. And, yeah, I think a lot of people probably expected them to hit the ground running. I thought they'd, play better. I thought Love would play better than he did. But, he is only a second-year starter. I would just look this up, and Aaron Rodgers in his second season as a starter, they were 2-2 at one point, 4-4 at another. Even in his third year, which was the year they won the Super Bowl, they were 6-6, 12 games in. So, there's just with a young quarterback, even though he had the success he did, there's still going to be ups and downs. And he just did not have he didn't have a terrible game, but he just missed some fairly easy throws that he made look routine last year, and he had a bad interception.
It's Packers columnist Pete Dougherty, Green Bay Press Gazette's kind enough to join us on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. I am sure that team-wise, Matt LaFleur and company have circled exactly what the Texans, and in particular Joe Mixon, did on the ground against what is supposed to be a vaunted Colts defensive front. Got shredded by Mixon and the Texans last weekend. And let's just say, for example, for the sake of the question here, it is Malik Willis coming up on Sunday. You feel comfortable that Josh Jacobs can kind of pick up that baton with this group and be very successful running the football, knowing that more than likely the backup quarterback's going to be under center?
Yeah, that's going to be rough sledding. The Colts are going to, of course, have done all their corrections, and it's going to be an issue with the guys up front. They're gonna be really unhappy and have something to prove. But more than that, they know that the Packers are going to try to run the ball. They know they're going to see read option. They know that Josh Jacobs is going to get a lot of carries because they're going to want to make things as easy as possible for Willis. And it is really hard in this league to run the ball when teams know you're going to run the ball. So, there's a good reason the Colts. I don't know. I saw a 3.5-point favorite. I don't know what the latest is.
Yeah.
But there's a good reason for that. Even though they have a young quarterback, it's just it's going to be a really rough go for the Packers offense, I would assume.
How much belief up there is there in the relief pitcher, so to speak, in Malik Willis here?
If you're talking about amongst fans and observers, probably hardly any at all.
Yeah.
He's only been here for 2.5 or 3 weeks,
right.
So he doesn't really know the offense. In the organization, of course, they're saying there's belief, but, it's got to be limited just because they don't have any track record and they haven't seen the guy play. So it's our uncharted territory. This is the NFL. You got to deal with it. But I think it's going to be a really rough going, and they're going to need to create some turnovers. And look, maybe, Willis can really run, so maybe he'll break off a couple really important scrambles, keeping drives alive, maybe a couple long runs. Maybe the defense will create, a couple turnovers, and that could be the difference. But they're going to have to play a really good, tight, low-mistake game and have Willis at least not lose it.
Hey, Pete, besides the injury with Jordan Love, give me the good and the bad from week number 1 in Brazil that you saw against the Eagles ultimately winning, but both the good and the bad that you hope for. The good, it changes and obviously is more consistent in week number 2 in the Lambeau Field home opener.
The good was they eventually ran the ball really well. Jacobs only had 4 yards on 6 carries, I think, at halftime, and he ended up averaging, 6 yards a carry. So he really took off in the second half. So they showed they can, run the ball when they had adjusted to what Philly was doing up front. There wasn't a ton. Yeah, that defense, they weren't terrible on defense, but this has been such a long-running story. This goes back to, a decade where it seems like whenever their defense has needed to get a stop in the last, 4 to 8 minutes of a game, a lot more likely than not, they don't get it and they don't get the ball back. And that's exactly what happened in this game. There was 7:52 left, I think, and they were down 2. And 7.5 minutes later, Philly was kicking a field goal to go up 5. So there was like 27 seconds left after that. They just couldn't get off the field, and they ran the ball right down their throats. So that was the real bad. And, early in the season, weird things happen. Teams don't play well. Last year the Packers were a bad team for the first half of the season. So you try not to take too much from, these early season games. But I'll be really interested to see how because they're facing the same kind of quarterback this week, a guy really talented, strong-armed guy who can really, really run. That's a lot to deal with. And historically, it's given their defenses, these running quarterbacks, has given this defense a big problem. So I'm really curious to see how they do this week.
Yeah, not only that, but Pete, you go back to the home opener here against the Texans, and I thought that there were going to be two things the Colts would offer, and I put them in the form of have to, because everything else I'm talking about basically is a question. But it was the defensive front, being able to get quarterback pressure, which they did, but ultimately just gave up chunks of yardage, which helped do them in. And it was the lack of production from, of all places, Jonathan Taylor. And I know that he's obviously going to be in the crosshairs of the defensive game plan, but we'd be surprised that Taylor didn't eclipse the 50-yard rushing mark in that week number 1 when he absolutely has to be a major important piece that simply production-wise was not in week 1 in that loss.
Yeah, he's a really good back. I mean, these teams are the Eagles and Colts are really comparable with, they both have a really high-level running back because Philly had Barkley, and they've got quarterbacks who can really run the ball. And it's always given these kind of guys have always given the Packers a lot of trouble, and I suspect they will again this week. And this is a game where, if the Packers, what if they get 17 points? That's probably doing pretty well, and I just don't know if they can hold the Colts under that.
It's we'll see. I mentioned this earlier. I do tend to fall in love with athleticism and big plays at time, and with Anthony Richardson, we'll see. I'm expecting the same type of thing. You'll have some big plays, but you'll also have, in terms of basketball here, Pete, you'll have some missed layups, as we saw with him as well. It is certainly a reboot of his rookie season, and that's something the Packers are going to get coming up on Sunday. It's a roller coaster ride with him, but when you're going up in those big moments, there's some spectacular stuff. But, the ordinary stuff, being comfortable in the pocket, for example, doesn't seem to suit him just yet as it might another quarterback.
Yeah, the Packers just have to hope that there are some, really serious growing pains early in the season for him, including this week, and maybe they can turn him over a couple times and, just somehow or other find a way to scratch out, 17 points somewhere in that vicinity and play the best defense that they played in quite a while.
So Pete Dougherty again covers the Packers, their columnist up in Green Bay at the Press-Gazette. He's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. How do the Packers now follow the career of Aaron Rodgers? How did they follow it? For example, on Monday night, do they want to see him do well, or do they want to see him fail?
Probably depends on who you're talking to, in the locker room or even in the front office. I suspect, just like with him going the other way, though they'd never say anything publicly, there's probably plenty of people who would enjoy seeing him struggle. As far as the fandom, by the time they got rid of him, the season ended, and I'd go, I'd be at the grocery store or, out having dinner at the gym, wherever, and I'd run into acquaintances, and we'd small talk, and then I'd say, so keep him or trade him. And, of course, they knew what I was talking about. And I would say if I asked 30 people that question, 90% of them said trade him. So I'm guessing there's plenty of people who are Packers fans who would probably prefer to see him fail than succeed.
Now, that just comes with the territory. When you break up like that or, force a breakup, if you will, that suggest is going to be the result. But I kind of wonder if he had built, a lot of that love up to maybe where that was a little bit more indestructible than others. But I'm assuming part of it is just his personality, too, in general, right, that people were worn out on?
Yeah, it was more that, it was all the COVID stuff and, all that stuff, I think, just added up. And people had their fill, plus the playoff failures. They won they won it all in 2010, and then they kept losing in the divisional round or the championship games after that. So I think that was, you combine those two things, and people had really turned on him, which was different than Favre, because the Packers basically pushed Favre out more than he did anything to upset the fan base. So when he went to the Jets, I know a lot of Packers fans, I think the ratings here were really high for Jets games, and I think my guess is a pretty good chunk of those people were pulling for him.
So Pete Dougherty, who is the columnist, covers the Packers. Do you trust Jordan Love long-term as he's taken over the reins, obviously, and had a good end of the season a year ago, obviously dealing with the injury now, but do you trust him to be that level of quarterback that they're paying him to be for the longer-term future there?
I mean, I think he's going to be good. I mean, there was enough in that second half of the season that was really, I think he threw, counting the playoffs, so those last 10 games, it was like 22 or 23 touchdowns and 3 picks. And, I mean, that Dallas game was a quarterback can't play any better than he played in that game. So I think so. But, it's not guaranteed. He is a young guy, and who knows, maybe defensive coordinators, they study these guys in the offseason, all the teams that are going to play them. They watch almost every game, and maybe somebody or a couple of teams will have stumbled onto something that they, find that'll really bother him, and then it's whether he can adjust to that or not. And sometimes, guys can't. So it's not a given that he's going to be really good, but I would have done the contract if I were the Packers, put it that way.
Hey, Pete, I feel this way about the AFC South, even though there's not much evidence after a week because only one team ended up winning last week. But is this the same? The NFC North, is this the best we have seen it from top to bottom in a long time?
It's getting there. I still, the Bears with that quarterback could end up being really, really good, but the chances of him being really good this year are extremely low. So there's going to be some struggles there. The Vikings with Darnold, I'll believe it when I see it for him to play really well for a full season. But the Lions are legit, and I think both those other two teams are on the upswing, even though, this year might not be their year. They could be really tough teams in the next, 2 or 3 or 4 years.
Hey, Pete, I'll let you go after this final one. I'm just kind of curious. Do you cover more up there than just the Packers? Do you write columns about everything?
No. It's we have 4 people at PackersNews.com, which is the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel,
right,
the Green Bay Press-Gazette, and a bunch of other papers in the state. We have 4 people who cover the Packers full time, and I'm one of them.
Well,
so I don't do anything but the Packers.
Well, I'm gonna ask you maybe to lean a little bit here because I am kind of curious. I don't know how many people might be as curious as I, but at Wisconsin Green Bay, Doug Gottlieb this offseason was hired as the coach and is going to continue on as a national talk show host. How has that been taken in there? And is it more about what they believe in him from what you've heard, if you do have any background knowledge to it, or is it more about the kind of, oh, wow factor, I guess, of national talk show host and head coach of a college basketball team at the same time?
Yeah, that was really interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Really interesting
and
approach.
it just
Very
occurred to me
unusual.
because of where you are right now. It kind of occurred to me before we close.
Yeah, how can that's asking a lot for a guy to have his own talk show and be a Division I coach. I mean, those guys have to be available for their players and coaches all the time. So it's really strange. It sounds to me just like from what I've heard, and of course what our reporters have reported on it. One of the attractions with him was he brought in a ton of NIL money that they otherwise would not have, and they have recruited all these guys who were pretty big recruits, much bigger than this league. But the question is, can he make all this talent blend? And these are guys who are leaving other programs, So, there's probably some issues that way too. but there is real talent that they haven't had here probably ever. And it'll be really interesting to see whether it works and whether a guy really can have a national talk show. I think it's a 5-day-a-week show, right?
It is, Pete, yeah.
Can a guy do that for, I'm guessing, a couple hours a day, right? Can he do that and be a Division I head coach? That is asking for a lot out of a guy.
That is. So you've got to have a pretty strong separation from your personal existence in life to what the rest of your audience would want to hear too. You probably don't want to turn that into 3 hours of Green Bay basketball talk, do you?
No, and you get the sense the guy really loves basketball, and I'm sure he knows a lot about it, but I don't think he's coached much. I think he was an assistant coach for a year or two in college basketball, and that's about it. His dad was a coach, so he comes from a coaching family. It's just really interesting, obviously really unusual. There's a lot of reason to be skeptical, but, we'll have to see what happens.
Telling you, it is such a weird time all the way around with NIL, with the transfer portal, and nothing seems to be much thought about in terms of long lasting. It's like, what can you do for me right now? And then we'll think about the longer term future when the longer term future rolls around. That's kind of where we are right now.
Yeah, it sure seems like they're going to have to somehow or other work out the equivalent of a CBA and start signing guys to contracts, because this just seems kind of insane that, your whole teams are turning over every year.
Yep. Hey, my producer, James, Pete, is coming up this weekend to Lambeau for the first time. What should he check out?
There's a great restaurant called the Union Hotel in De Pere, which is, if you want a flavor of what Green Bay is really like, that's a good place to go. I think he's going to really like it. The atmosphere around the stadium and all of that. I think he's gonna really like it. And there'll be a lot of Colts fans. Now that tickets are available online through these brokers, it's always, I would say there's always at least 10,000 fans from the opposing team at these games. So there's a lot of smattering of colors all around. But I think he'll really like the atmosphere and having the stadium plopped down in the middle of a neighborhood in Green Bay and Ashwaubenon.
Hey, Pete, it's been an absolute pleasure with our discussion, man. Thank you very much for doing so.
Sure, thanks for having me.
It's Pete Dougherty right there, Packers columnist, Green Bay Press Gazette, via the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. A lot there to chew on if you want regarding the Packers' current state. He also agreed with us that it was more of a gamesmanship tactic by Matt LaFleur earlier today, talking about the window or the door. Something was wide open as far as the possibility for Jordan Love to participate on Sunday. But like anybody else, he would give a firm lean to one Malik Willis, who hasn't been there, as we have also mentioned, very long. But a formidable running game and something that absolutely dogged out the Colts in that opening Sunday loss to the Texans at Lucas Oil Stadium. All right, quick break. We shall return. I got your calls the rest of the way. 239-1070. Go ahead and chime in on anything you would like. We'll discuss it. Fever Aces tonight. Talk a little bit more about that. The first back-to-backs Wednesday and Friday with Las Vegas here in town at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Got the Colts Daily Update, top of the hour, and on the road with special guests coming up. For our special guest, Brent Halverson tomorrow. Talk about our Larceny Bourbon Locks and Luna Azul Tequila shots for week number 2 tomorrow at Coach's Tavern. That as well in a couple of minutes. AAA Membership Lounge via YouTube Live. Thank you for watching, listening, participating. 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
The Ride with JMV.
And the beat goes on, yeah. And the beat goes on.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
And tomorrow's show, Coach's Tavern downtown. Large City Bourbon Locks, Luna Azul Tequila Shots. We'll see you there at 3 o'clock. Friday, Bud Light Blue Friday. Bears Colts tickets. Ale Emporium, Castleton coming up on Friday. Pete Dougherty was really good. Covers the Packers. The Green Bay Post-Gazette, I believe is what it is. The Packer columnist. He just joined us. Podcast 1075thefan.com. Charles Arbuckle, the weekend upcoming of college football. And, of course, Charles, the former Colts tight end, also a former tight end at UCLA, had a lot of things to say regarding UCLA and his alma mater, his football program. And that matchup with IU coming up on Saturday night in Pasadena. Also talked a little Notre Dame and Purdue with Charles. That podcast, 1075thefan.com. Kevin Bowen also a little bit earlier as well. And James Boyd of The Athletic not only talked Colts with us, but the Fever and the Aces coming up at Gainbridge Fieldhouse tonight. Podcast, again, abound, 1075thefan.com. Inside the AAA Membership Lounge via YouTube Live. Thank you all for joining us in there. Shout out to Vic. Vic in Florida is watching, listening, participating, and everybody in there. Thank you all for doing just that. All right, 239-1070 is the number. And Adam is online, too, joining the show. Hello, Adam. How are you?
Hey, how are you doing, John?
Fantastic, Adam. Go ahead.
Got a couple things for you.
Yes, sir.
Can we do like a moment of silence for September 11th?
Yes.
And also, just got to give you out of your words, what in the jackassery are you wearing today? I see that on the YouTube. You're wearing Tampa Bay colors. What are you doing?
Well, as you know, I'm a big fan of old school uniforms and logos, and this is the creamsicle old school Buccaneer Bruce logo of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I love it. Absolutely love it.
I was just telling a buddy about that because he's a Tampa Bay fan, and I told him, I said, hey, man, I'm diehard Colts, but we got to get this run game going. We got to get the defensive rolling. We got to do something.
Where does the old school Buccaneers logo and uniform rank in your favorite uniforms of all time?
I'd probably say maybe 6.
It's all right, then. That's all. You're probably not as old as me. I think us or we of the older generation probably appreciate this. And, you know, I have an oil derrick of the Houston Oilers old logo, too. We probably appreciate that more than those that are a little bit younger, I would imagine.
All right.
Yep. Adam, anything else?
Nope. Just have a good afternoon, and I'll be listening tomorrow.
You got it, buddy. Thank you, Adam. Yeah, if you're watching via the AAA Membership Lounge, that's YouTube Live, it's just a T-shirt. It's not a jersey or anything like that, but it's orange and has the Buccaneers old school logo on it. I'll be complete and utter honesty. I haven't been able to wear this shirt in years. So now I'm able to wear it. I've actually gone through my closet, and again, a shout out to Premier Weight Loss and Thomas. I'm like putting on clothes that I haven't worn since the 90s. And I still had them, for God's sake. You found me putting on some Guess jeans in my closet earlier today, and then I found this T-shirt, and I go, hey, man, I'm going to rock this bad boy. But I do love the logo. Really, all time for me, it's between this and the late 70s, multi-orangish, very bright colors of the Houston Astros. How should I put it? The Enos Cabell era of Astros uniforms. These are my all-time favorites right here. Then growing up, I was a Bears fan, and back then the Buccaneers were in the Bears division. And for most of that time, I think the Buccaneers entered the NFL in 1976, and they just, it seemed, for such a long time got pounded, especially in the 1980s. But it is Buccaneer Bruce right here is the logo. Yeah, I know I'm going to rock a Genera T-shirt here pretty soon if you're not careful. I got a whole new wardrobe. Unfortunately, it's from 1994. Justin's next, James, at 239-1070. Hello, Justin. Justin, I'm here for you. We are adjusting from Justin, and Mike is next. Hello, Mike. Mike, are you there, sir?
Yeah, I'm here.
Go
Can you
ahead.
hear me?
Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, who did you say is going up to Lambeau?
James, my producer, is going to Lambeau. James, jump on here and talk to Mike here really quick.
What's
This
up,
is
Mike?
James. This is James.
All right. So I live in Noblesville. I got my whole family and I are going up Friday to go up to Lambeau to watch the Packers and Colts play.
Awesome.
So a few things that are going on. They're actually throwing a Counting Crows concert free Saturday night at Lambeau. So not sure if you're into that.
I'm trying to think. James likes Lamb of God and Pantera. Where does Adam Duritz and the Counting Crows fit in there? But by the way, that's a good get, though.
A free
for
concert's
pregame
always
show.
a free concert.
Why don't you go, man? Listen to Mr. Jones.
I might.
The Rain King, Long December. Yeah, the hits. I'm sure Duritz will be playing.
Yeah. And then if you're looking for a good place to eat right outside the stadium, it's called Kroll's. Kroll's West, I believe. And it's just a good burger joint.
Gotcha. Well, I'm always down for a good burger. You said it was Kroll's?
Yep, Kroll's
Gotcha.
with a K, yep.
If I were to go up there, is there any place that gives me a package of tuna I could eat? Tuna and cottage cheese?
I don't know about that.
I bet you guys got a ton of cottage. I should say you guys, but I bet Wisconsin's probably got the best cottage cheese of any state in America, right?
Yeah, California likes to say they're the cheese state, but they're not.
I got you. Hey, man. Mike, thank you for the updates and that advice for James, man. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
Very nice of Mike right there. I have become a big-time cottage cheese connoisseur here. I have fallen in love with the low-fat brand Daisy. Remember Daisy used to say a dollop of Daisy? I think that meant sour cream, and dollop sounds really weird. Low-fat cottage cheese, Daisy. I've tried the Kroger stuff, and it just is pretty runny and gross. Sorry, Kroger. Stop jacking up your prices, Kroger. But Daisy's it. Hatfield says, I prefer to call it the Jose Cruz era. Yeah, we could go to a variety of ways. I normally go Enos Cabell, Cesar Cedeno, Alan Ashby, Craig Reynolds, Art Howe. And see, that was back when the Astros were in the National League West, and as Reds fans got to see them on the reg. So those were some good years right there. Joseph writes this, so I do love the Creamsicles, but all time got to be the 74 Braves, followed by the Chargers Powder Blues. I can't make an argument with either one of those. Oh, the awesome Gritty chimes in. Daisy low-fat cottage cheese is the best. It isn't runny at all. I completely agree. Is that the best cottage cheese out there? See, I'm glad we're having this discussion right now because it's the discussion you thought we would never have on this show. James, you into cottage cheese?
I am not at all.
Is Wisconsin the cheese state? Is it cottage cheese too? Is that it?
I just always thought Wisconsin was just the cheese state in general. Just
Yeah.
Cheese and beer, really.
Cheese and beer.
Yeah. The two things that any man really needs.
So what beer are you going to go up and have? Miller? Do they still have Miller Genuine Draft? Is Miller Genuine, is it still available?
I have no idea.
Genuine Draft? Now, Pabst Blue Ribbon is in Wisconsin, so I'm assuming they'll probably have that for you. Probably have that on tap at the game.
I'm just going to have whatever
Some
looks
PBR,
good.
baby.
I'm not really a beer connoisseur, but I'll just have whatever I get recommended.
PBR. Yeah. JMV, I know you aren't a fan of Michigan, but Michigan brand cottage cheese is my favorite. It's not runny at all. You guys are awesome. Thank you for the cottage cheese discussion. It's me. Skivvy says, cool, you had Pete on. He's a good one now. He was a really good conversation. Corey Hall chimes in. We brought up the fact that we need more old school wrestling promo type of re-entries on this show. A good wrestling re-entry would be the Woo Off with Ric Flair and Jay Lethal from his TNA run. I don't know anything about that. Ric Flair, I do.
Yeah, I know that one. I know that promo. It's just the two of them just, you know how Ric Flair always yells woo?
Yeah.
They
Woo.
just yell woo at each other for a while.
You know the Ric Flair story that I have when he had a spider on his head, right?
I feel like you've told me this.
Yeah. We were at the Carb Day. Me and Clayton Anderson were out there, and he was between us, and I was interviewing him, and there was a spider that was walking on his head, and I didn't tell him. I go, how do you tell Ric Flair there's a spider walking on your head?
You should have just.
I just let her go.
You should have just reached over without saying anything.
Flicked it.
Flick it or
I should
smack
have
his head.
flicked it with my index finger.
Smack Ric Flair's head. That'll go great.
Hey, hold on 1 second. Rick, you have a spider crawling on your head right now. Or even better, hey, Rick, there's a bug crawling in your hair. What is that exactly? That would not have ended well for me. So I just kind of let that spider walk around. I'll go large curd, Jason. Thank you very much. Kevin says, you know what cottage cheese is good? The trash can. Spotted Cow for the local beer choice. James, Spotted Cow, the beer of Wisconsin. Everybody's chiming in with it. I have had Spotted Cow before. It's all right. Got the Harrah's Hoosier Park race of the day coming up, 50-50 betting and dining. Harrah's Hoosier Park Racing and Casino in Anderson. JMV, I can tell you're losing your voice a little bit. Can you give us your old school Major League Lou Brown voice? And I don't know why this is happening. I'm assuming it's like the dust because it's so dry around here. So the Lou Brown, see if I can do it here. Go to the break. Forget about the curveball, Ricky. Give him the heater. Not as good as when I have a cold, but not too bad. The late, great James Gammons, the actor who the Gorman knows very well. In fact, did you know this? James Gammon is the actor that played Lou Brown in Major League. Gorman has a money clip, and Jeffrey Gorman is his name, that was given to him by James Gammons, because James Gammons is JG too. He's got Lou Brown's money clip, which I always thought was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
True story right there. Lou Brown, the late, great Lou Brown from Major League. Harrah's Hoosier Park race of the day, 50-50 betting and dining on the way. Somebody's going to win it. Here it is.
Sports. 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Glad you guys enjoyed my Lou Brown impression. Sean Collinsworth said, I'm guessing the cottage cheese discussion of 2024 is what is going to push you over the top in the Sports Broadcasting Hall of Fame voting. Thank you. You think that will get me nominated, Sean, for a Spectrum? The IBA people hate my guts, I think, which I probably would too. I'm a little unconventional. But thank you, Sean. I think that this is probably worthy of some sort of nomination. Just probably not a good one, buddy. Harris Hoosier Park Race of the Day, Tyler S., winning horse, Nifty 50. $9.60 was won on a $2 bet. $2 exacta payout was $43.60. The 50-cent trifecta went for $236.25. 50-50 betting and dining for Tyler. Today's winner of the Harris Hoosier Park Race of the Day. And thank you very much, Rick Moore, for always being a part of that. Rick and all my friends up there, awesome. Be back up to Harris Hoosier Park in Anderson before you know it, too. Chris Waldridge used to work here, who I believe now is getting a job at, do we call him rival? Cumulus. That's where Smiley is. Dave Smiley. The second best DJ in Indianapolis. That's where Dave Smiley resides with the Smiley Morning Show. And Chris is going to be over there now, too. He chimes in, James, regarding your trek to Lambeau on Sunday. They still do make Miller Genuine Draft, evidently, according to Chris. Tell James to enjoy a spotted cow. That's what New Glarus is what that is. Spotted cow, I guess. Everybody's talking that up.
Okay.
And tell him to go to the Stadium View Bar, which is outside Lambeau Field.
I will do that.
Hey, Chris, when you go over to Cumulus, say hello to the second best DJ in Indianapolis, Dave Smiley of the Smiley Morning Show. Tell him I said hello. Tell him the best DJ in Indy says hello. JMV, I'm heading to Wisconsin this Sunday. Got me thinking about my all-time favorite nudie mag, the 2009 issue of Girls of the Big Ten. Man, you can't, Ryan, do this to me at the end of the show. Damn it. My buddy sent it to me on deployment and glued the IU media guy and the cover over the top of it to hide it. Girls of the Big Ten, 2009. Yeah, all moms right now, too. The thing about that, you go back even further, there's probably some grandmas from the 90s with Girls of the Big Ten. Well done, Ryan. That is great. All right, 239-1070. Let's get him on here quickly. Our good friend Fulton. Hello, Fulton.
Hello, JMV. How are you?
Fulton, how are you?
Great. I'm the athlete of the month this year.
You're the athlete of the month. No, you know what? Yep. You're athlete of the year, in our opinion, buddy. That's what we're going to go ahead. We're going to nominate you and name you athlete of the year.
Sounds great, yeah. And we won a softball game on Saturday, and we're the back-to-back champions.
You are a big-time winner, buddy. It's good to hear from you. Thanks for calling.
Yep, good to talk to you.
You got it. That's Fulton right there. Fulton's a big winner. It's our friend Fulton. Hey, James, great job today. Pete Dougherty was really good from Green Bay. Covers the Packers. Green Bay Post-Gazette. Bowen, sorry I referenced him as Kevin Boner. That's my fault. Charles Arbuckle and James Boyd podcast, 1075thefan.com. Larceny Bourbon Locks, Luna Azul Tequila Shots coming up tomorrow. Brent Halverson and I, Coach's Tavern downtown. Amon Green, former Packer running back. Greg Rosenthal as well talks NFL with us. That's all coming up tomorrow. Hopefully I see you at Coach's Tavern. Matt Taylor and I, Colts Daily Update straight ahead. That's next.